after the mysterious death of Mississippi teenager Nolan Wells following a boat trip with friends to Horn Island on the 4th of July. A community in mourning and demanding answers.
And we just want to know what happened to Nolan.
When we finally got his phone, me and my sister went through the phone. We went in his Snapchat. He had 2 accounts, absolutely nothing. It wasn't even 24 hours, which is how long videos and pictures stay in Snapchat. And I was just like, that can't be. Like, I've seen Nolan whenever he snaps, like when he goes and he's having fun, like he does videos. Like, there was absolutely nothing, no saved videos. And even my sister was like, yeah, that's suspicious,
Michael,
you know.
We having an independent autopsy done at the behest of his family. Colin Kaepernick helped pay for the independent autopsy. We flew his body up from Mississippi to D.C. because they wanted an autopsy done by a person with no interaction with the Mississippi law enforcement, because there's an issue of trust here that is really important. And the fact that they keep trying to say, well, suggesting it was a drowning, but nobody out there reported him drowning. It's not adding up, Michael Strahan. It is not adding up.
A boat radio cracks open across dark water. A voice, tight with panic, breaks through.
Thinking, can you all please come?
And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's on board.
The boat is sinking, and somebody still isn't home yet. Nobody on that call knew it yet, but the person they'd leave behind that afternoon would never walk off that island alive. 2 days later, a park ranger wades into the shallows of a stretch of coastline most Americans have never heard of and finds an 18-year-old in the same water where his friends had laughed with him hours earlier. No wound, no struggle, no answer. Just a mother standing on a beach, asking a question the FBI is now being pulled in to help answer.
Honestly, because of the way the stories are just so inconsistent and how that day went, it's just, we can't say.
How does a teenager disappear in broad daylight, surrounded by people who knew him, and turn up dead in the same tide that carried everyone else home safely? Tonight, that question just went federal. Threats are being investigated. A sheriff who once said no foul play is now facing furious questions from a grieving family, a civil rights attorney, and thousands of strangers online who refuse to look away. Before we go further, this case involves the death of a young person and disputed claims between grieving people. We tell it because a family is still waiting for the truth, not for clicks. If that's not why you're here, we understand. If you're staying, welcome to Root Crimes. Drop where you're watching from tonight. And if you want to be here the moment this case breaks open again, subscribe now, because we are not waiting for it to go cold. Start with this.
He just had a big heart, like, to really know Nolan, to have him as your friend it was something special.
Do you worry that he might have trusted too much?
Sometimes, yeah, and that was something we always talked to him about.
Nolan Xavier Wells wasn't a stranger to anyone. He was everyone's favorite person in the room. 18 years old, a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, a recent Ocean Springs High School grad with his whole life sitting in front of him like an open door. Friends describe him the same way, over and over, without prompting. The guy who made things easier just by being there. The one who noticed if someone was left out. The one who showed up. The night before he disappeared, he cooked his mother dinner. Baked salmon because she'd had a long day at work. It wasn't a special occasion. It was just a Friday night, an 18-year-old taking care of his mom because he felt like it. He hugged her, told her he loved her, and left to spend the night at a friend's house. That was July 3rd. By the next morning, he was in a boat with a group of friends, heading toward a strip of untouched coastline called Horn Island, a barrier island about 10 miles off Mississippi's Gulf Coast, reachable only by private boat, and about to become the last place anyone would see Nolan Wells alive. Here's the part that should unsettle you. Nothing about this day was unusual. No red flags, no warning signs, just friends, sunshine, and a boat ride that 100 families make every summer without a second thought. Horn Island isn't remote in the sinister sense. It's popular. Locals go there for exactly this: a holiday cookout on the sand, music, the water. On July 4th, it was crowded with boats and groups just like Nolan's. That's what makes this case so hard to look away from. This wasn't a dangerous night in a dangerous place. It was a holiday, and by 3 p.m., his friends would be the last people to ever see him. At 3 p.m., witnesses say Wells was talking with a young woman on the island's north end. Multiple people on the island that day have placed him there, in that stretch of sand, in those final confirmed minutes before everything about this story becomes contested. Here's where the story splits into two versions, and neither one has been proven. According to family attorney Ben Crump, that young woman later told investigators Wells said he was heading back to rejoin his friends, but his friends told police something different, that Wells said he was the one choosing to stay behind, planning to catch a later ride with another group. One of those accounts doesn't match the other. Investigators haven't said which one holds up, and neither have we, because nobody outside that conversation actually knows. At 4:31 p.m., GPS data obtained by CBS News confirms it precisely. The boat pulled away from Horn Island. Without him. Nolan Wells stayed on that island, and the next confirmed sighting of him would be 2 days later, in the water. Now here's the audio that's currently tearing this case wide open.
And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's on board.
That's the boat's operator, radioing for a tow. The bilge pump had failed. Water was pouring in fast enough that staying on the island was no longer an option for the people on that boat. A dispatcher asks if everyone on board is safe. The operator says yes, everyone's accounted for. Sit with that for a second. In that exact moment, the people on that boat believed the group was whole, that nobody was missing. They were wrong. Judge Ashley Cole, whose son, Warren Hudson, was one of the friends aboard, has publicly backed this account, saying her son last saw Wells at 3 p.m. and that Wells made the call to stay behind. She's also said her family is cooperating fully and isn't trying to obstruct anything, a statement she felt she needed to make publicly, given how fast this case has moved online. But a mechanical failure doesn't explain what happened after that boat disappeared over the horizon. And that's the part nobody can answer yet. If you want to be here the second new audio, new evidence, or a new witness breaks in this case, subscribe right now. We track cases like this until there's an answer, not until the headlines move on. Wells wasn't reported missing until 11 p.m. that night, nearly 8 hours after he was last seen. That gap alone has become one of the quieter, less discussed mysteries in this case. 8 hours where nobody outside that friend group knew anything was wrong. His mother, Christine Wansley, posted online in the middle of the night, begging for information. What followed was a full-scale search. Jackson County Sheriff's deputies, the Coast Guard, National Park Service Rangers, and volunteers from the United Cajun Navy, a search and rescue group that's helped find dozens of missing people across the Gulf Coast in past cases. One volunteer with that group later told CNN the island had been packed that day, with alcohol involved in parts of the crowd, and that strong rip currents were present in the water around Horn Island, a detail that matters for understanding the search, not for assigning blame to anyone. For 2 days, nothing. Then, on the morning of July 6th, a park ranger found him, in the water, off the same stretch of coastline where he'd last been seen laughing with friends. He was identified through dental records. And that's when the story stopped being a tragedy and became a mystery. Here's where this case exploded, from a local tragedy into a national firestorm. And it wasn't the death itself, it was 4 words. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind told investigators there were no obvious signs of trauma at the scene. That's a careful, technical statement. It means nothing was visible without lab testing. Not that nothing happened, just that nothing was visible yet. Lind himself requested the state medical examiner conduct a full autopsy, specifically because of the condition in which the body was found, to determine, definitively, whether trauma or foul play was involved. But when that got repeated publicly as no foul play was suspected, something got lost in translation. To a grieving family and to millions watching online, that sounded like a conclusion, like a door closing before the investigation had even started. Christine Wansley didn't hide her reaction. She said the accidental drowning framing made her and her husband deeply uncomfortable and asked, publicly, why officials were in such a hurry to land on an answer. "What we're wanting is transparency," she said. "At the end of the day, we want answers." That one line, "no foul play," is arguably the single biggest reason this case has stayed in the headlines for 2 weeks straight. Because if investigators don't actually know the cause of death yet, how could anyone rule anything out? This next detail is the one that keeps true crime audiences up at night, because it's the kind of detail that doesn't sit easily with an accident. Nolan Wells' phone never left the island with him. It left with his friends. Crump has publicly called it unusual for a teenager to be separated from his phone, and pointed out that Wells' own parents tracked it down using the Life 360 app before law enforcement did. When his mother accessed the phone, 2 Snapchat accounts had no saved content from July 4th, content that, under normal circumstances, would typically still be there for at least 24 hours. Investigators haven't said why it wasn't. Both sides have now agreed to a joint inspection of that device. Family investigators and Jackson County detectives, examining it together, so that whatever conclusions come out of it come from both sides at once, not one side alone. If you've seen anything about this case online, you've probably seen this video, and you've probably been told exactly what it shows. Here's the problem. 3 different people, on the record, describe it 3 different ways. Crump has said the video captures Wells, mid-argument, demanding his phone back. Longtime friend Trayston Shepard says, that's not Wells at all. He says it's his own voice, caught in an unrelated dispute with a stranger, on a different part of the island entirely. A second friend, Javon Williams, told TMZ, the voice sounds like yet another friend, one he says he was trying to calm down in the moment. 3 named people, 3 different explanations, none of them confirmed by investigators, and no official statement yet on whose voice is actually on that recording. This is exactly the kind of detail true crime cases live and die on, and right now, it's still wide open. Here's the headline everyone's talking about, and here's what it actually means, because the two aren't the same thing. Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed the FBI is assisting with digital evidence. Not unusual, since Horn Island sits on federal land, and the sheriff's office regularly partners with the Bureau on cases there. But separately, the FBI is investigating something more serious. Interstate threats made against people connected to this case, after Judge Ashley Cole went public about threatening messages her family received online. 2 federal threads, not one. And conflating them is exactly how misinformation has spread around this case for 2 weeks straight. This is the level of detail most channels skip past for a punchier headline. If that's not good enough for you either, subscribe, because we're not here to skip it. This case has become something bigger than one family's grief. CNN has reported that Wells was the only black man in an otherwise white friend group in a town that's roughly 79% white. And to be clear up front, no evidence of a hate crime has been presented by investigators at any point in this case. That context matters precisely because it hasn't been proven either way, and because the demographic detail alone has made this case a national flashpoint regardless of what investigators ultimately find. Reverend Al Sharpton, who stood beside the family at press conferences, has said publicly that race hasn't been ruled in or out, but that the circumstances demand real scrutiny, invoking Mississippi's history with cases involving black victims, and saying the family refuses to let this get quietly filed away. More than 100 protesters gathered in Ocean Springs demanding answers. No charges have been filed against anyone. This is where things stand right now, not where they end. Attorney Ben Crump says once the investigation wraps, it goes straight to a grand jury, following a meeting with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath. The state medical examiner's office completed the autopsy on July 7th, but is still waiting on toxicology results, which forensic experts say can take 2 to 3 weeks or longer to come back from outside labs. The family has commissioned their own independent autopsy, conducted by a Washington, D.C. forensic pathologist with no ties to Mississippi law enforcement, funded, according to Crump, by Colin Kaepernick. Crump has said the family wants those results made public, in full, regardless of what they show. As of right now, no official cause of death, no charges, no arrests, just a family, a sheriff's office under pressure, and a country waiting on lab results. Funeral services were held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, with Reverend Al Sharpton officiating. Tyler Perry covered the costs. Christine Wansley has asked for exactly 2 things throughout this entire ordeal: verified facts over speculation, and peace over confrontation. She specifically asked anyone protesting on her son's behalf to stay peaceful, because, she says, that's who Nolan was. Someone who never liked conflict. Someone who wouldn't want any of this turning into something ugly in his name. Here's what's still unanswered tonight: an official cause of death, why his phone and keys never left with him, whose voice is actually in that video, why 2 witnesses gave accounts of his final movements that directly contradict each other. Those threads are still being pulled. And when they unravel, whether that's a grand jury decision, an autopsy release, or a new piece of evidence, we will be here with it, verified, before it's a headline anywhere else. That's the only reason to trust a channel covering something this serious. Getting it right, not getting it first. If you want to be here the moment that happens, subscribe now. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world tonight, tell us in the comments, because a lot of people are watching this one closely, and for a lot of different reasons.